The Spinoff Podcast Network.
Are you making the most of your KiwiSaver investment? Generate is an award-winning KiwiSaver provider with a track record of strong long-term performance. Making a smart decision now could add tens of thousands of dollars by the time you reach retirement. Book a no-obligation chat with a Generate KiwiSaver advisor today at generatekiwisaver.co.nz/get-advice. A copy of the product disclosure statement is available at generatekiwisaver.co.nz. The issuer of the scheme is Generate Investment Management Limited, and of course, past performance does not guarantee future returns.
I'm Toby Manhire, and this is Juggernaut, the story of the Fourth Labour government, a podcast in 6 parts.
Doesn't give my opponents much time to run up to an election, does it?
This nation is at risk.
What do you think you're up to now, you perverted little liar?
I could smell the uranium on it as you lean towards it.
There's a radical overhaul in the history of New Zealand's administration.
Juggernaut, the story of the Fourth Labour government, made with the support of New Zealand On Air. Listen now on the Spinoff or wherever you get your podcasts. Tēnā koutou katoa no mai haere mai. Welcome to this very special live spin-off event, the Class of 2017 Candidate Diary Reunion. My name is Toby Manhire, and I'd like to give an extra big welcome to Spinoff Members who are here with us tonight. We couldn't do very much without our members, and we definitely wouldn't be able to do this event. So support us if you can. Tell your friends, buy a membership for your enemies, do whatever it takes. Way back in 2017, when the Spinoff was just a fledgling little website, we're now a fledgling medium-sized website. With the election coming up, we invited a group of first-time candidates to write for us, sort of periodically through the campaign. And we invited the 4 major parties at that time were National, Labour, the Greens and New Zealand First. So we approached all 4, and New Zealand First snubbed us. But otherwise, we completely hit the jackpot. We got Kiritapu Allan from Labour, Eric Stanford from National, and Chlöe Swarbrick from the Greens, who have all, soared, really.
Stumbled.
That's fair to say.
Survived.
Yeah. We're still here.
We were chatting before about how they're going to, at the end, we're going to ask for some advice for future characters. So they're future candidates in other elections, and they're having to get themselves into character to show some enthusiasm after a long week in the House. Kiri Allan entered Parliament in 2017 on the list. She became Junior Whip. She did a podcast with another newbie MP called Chlöe Swarbrick. How many episodes?
3?
I reckon about 3.
Yeah. We
Good
tried
to
live streaming once. Yeah. And then I think we recorded 2 that we didn't upload. There's a lot of admin in podcasts.
Yeah. Kudos to you guys.
I think it's important to leave it to middle-aged men.
You guys do have the most opinions.
Yeah. Kiri won the East Coast electorate at her second attempt in 2020 and was catapulted into Cabinet as Minister for Conservation and Emergency Management. A few months ago, she was promoted up the ranks to Minister of Justice, which is quite a portfolio to inherit, and it's just as well she had some experience in emergency management for that. Back in August 2017, she was describing how she had narrowly avoided vomiting before going on TV. Today, she's being tipped as a future Labour leader. Welcome, Kiri Allan.
I still frequently get that feeling where I want to vomit before really big occasions.
Like now?
Oh, yeah.
So are you eating that pizza just before?
Erica Stanford succeeded her old boss Murray McCulley by winning East Coast Bays in 2017. She quickly emerged as one of the most effective, arguably the most effective opposition MP, focusing intensely on her immigration and more recently education portfolios, while some of her colleagues focused intensely on murdering each other. At the end of last year, Christopher Luxon promoted her to 7th ranking in caucus. Back in August 2017, she was writing about getting tissues jammed in her armpits by the makeup assistant during a TV interview and offering the moral never wear silk.
Yep, that still don't. To this day. Well, not light-coloured silk anyway. Always avoid the light-coloured silks.
And today she is being tipped as a future national leader. Welcome, Erica Stanford.
Hey.
Chlöe Swarbrick stormed into public view during her run for the Auckland mayoralty in 2016 and prompted a bidding war among parliamentary parties. That wasn't won by ACT, but it was won by the Greens. And she was elected as a list MP in 2017. In 2020, she pulled off one of the most dazzling electoral successes New Zealand has seen by winning the seat of Auckland Central. Chlöe became easily the most compelling and eloquent voice for a yes vote in the 2020 referendum to legalise cannabis.
We're still lost.
I was going to add that. But, and has been a tireless legislator from the crossbenches. In August 2017, she was a young, outspoken woman talking about a revolution. Today, she's a young, outspoken woman talking about a revolution.
With a few more white hairs.
Also being tipped as a future Green leader. Welcome, Chlöe Swarbrick.
I've just realised something. We all won our seats because of retiring great long-term national MPs. It just twigged.
I'm so upset that Nikki didn't run in 2020. I'll never forgive her for that.
Of this event is the heirs to the national throne, really.
You're both very welcome.
Let's talk a bit about the before times a little bit. What were the kind of key events that led you guys to entering politics? Erica, you were a TV producer. How do you go from being a TV producer to standing for Parliament?
Well, it was a fill-in job. That was my mom job. I was an export manager, and then what catapulted me, I suppose, into politics was working for Macaulay. He wasn't around much because he was the Minister of Foreign Affairs, getting us a seat on the Security Council, and so I ended up doing lots of his work, and so that was kind of for me the catalyst. And then obviously him retiring. And
you worked in his office for some time, and then
about 4.5 years.
As well?
Not in Parliament, just in his electorate office for about 4.5 years.
Kiri, is it true that Andrew Geddis's penchant for a glass of whiskey played a part in your legal and political career? Is that a true story?
It's 100% a true story.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I was a first-year student up here. I was really probably doing that just so I could get the student allowance so that I could buy beers, if I'm being frank. But so I was doing some study up here, and I was working in a bar in the evenings, Grand Central down Ponsonby Road, and this guy would come in once a month, sit at the end of my bar stool, and we'd rant about the world. I was 18 and I knew quite a lot about the world. And so we'd just have these debates every Friday night, once a month. It was with this gentleman. Anyway, everyone has a bit of a yarn when they come into a bar, and everybody's got a bit of a reckon, but they all tell you these great things about who they are, where they're from. This chap tried to tell me he was a lawyer. And all of his mates that he'd bring in, had all been to these fancy universities like Harvard and Stanford, things I'd only heard about from the movies. The gentleman that kept coming into my bar, he said to me, you've got to go study law. You've got to go, you've got all these reckons. You should do something about it. And so he started sending me enrolment packs to my bar, law texts. Turns out he was Professor Mark Hennigan, and his mates were, Dr. Andrew Geddis, and that guy had just at that point returned back from Harvard, I think it was. So, I was working in this bar, receiving all these textbooks from these random professors going, oh, sweet. Maybe I should check this thing out called, what is that uni? Yeah, cool.
Wow. And then the Minister of Justice.
Yeah. It's a very standard trajectory.
I love it. Chloe, we talked about I mentioned the mayoralty run. Can you tell me, I guess, what prompted that and how that turned into Parliament? Am I right whether there was a bidding war, or am I making that up?
So how I ended up, I guess, falling down the rabbit hole was at this tiny little radio station, number one alternative radio station in Auckland, 95 BFM, for about 4.5 years. And it's been a long time interviewing politicians and feeling increasingly pissed off by the fact that they didn't answer my question, even though when you're on student radio, you have about 10 minutes to ask them the same question over and over again. And It was during the end of 2015, start of 2016, when I had just finished my law degree and was interviewing the kind of top 4 candidates as prescribed by the mainstream media for the Auckland mayoralty. That I was asking them about, what they were going to do with the future of our city, and watching a bunch of my mates who just graduated, moving overseas, particularly to Australia, where, you could earn $22 an hour bagging supermarket groceries and then find the time and space to do the thing that you loved on a side. And they also had like great public transport and awesome nightlife and stuff. And here I was trying to convince my mates that we could do those things here in Tamaki Makaurau, but it felt as though whenever we were doing those things that the kind of system was pushing back against us. And yeah, I was just watching more and more people escape as a result. So it's kind of putting this to all these people who wanted to be in charge and lead, and they seem so out of touch with that as the experience of me and my communities and my family. And I did what any rational 22-year-old would do, and I Googled how to become the Mayor of Auckland. And I found that you had to be over the age of 18. I actually waited to turn 22, so the final day that you could put in your nomination forms was July the 4th. My birthday is June 26th, so I waited to be 22 because I thought that would be far more appropriate.
Clearly.
Obviously. I had to pay $200 administrative fees, obviously could scrape that together, and 2 people nominate you. My ongoing joke is that means at least 2 people in Auckland will vote for you. It's a really interesting group of people who run in local body elections, which is great. We love local democracy. And yeah, cut my teeth, obviously, debating, Phil Goff, former leader of the Labour Party, who went on to be our mayor, and a range of other people. And throughout that process was really dedicated to how do we produce policy that actually will work. And it might not be immediately obvious, but I'm a real nerd. So really wanted to understand that stuff, and came at it, I guess, from the perspective that I get really angry when politicians and political parties approach the public as though they're dumb, or as though they don't understand what's going on. And I think that the public deserves a greater level of debate. So that was kind of, how I fell down that rabbit hole. After that, came in third place. Third place. Just less than 30,000 votes. And had a few different political parties approach me, spoke to a few different people, and went with the Greens because despite them not being able to kind of guarantee a place, it was the alignment of values, and I guess also the ability to, off the bat, just be straight up about the things that I wanted to do. I don't want to speak for these guys or cast any impost on, the constraints that they may be under, but I think that in a party smaller than the 2 historical big ones, that there's a little bit more freedom sometimes to express stuff, to shake some shit up.
Do you guys think that's fair?
I think that all political parties, there are constraints, and I think that Erica and I were in the 2 larger ones, which you presume, or to date anyway, in electoral politics in New Zealand, one of our parties has always held the helm. And so therefore you enter into these parties on that basis that at some point in time you'll hold those treasury benches, the keys to the treasury, and therefore you make decisions accordingly and you operate within the confines. I think that's what I like about MMP, is that we do have support parties, other parties in Parliament that bring specific lens and views to particular issues. They push us, and they influence decisions in a range of different ways. But I'm sure Chloe would probably agree that there's, even within those smaller parties, there's still constraints and confines, and the politics of people is always fun. So, there's differences, and there are some things that are quite aligned. But I think the various roles we have, they've all got a bit of a role to play in the matrix of New Zealand politics.
Let's talk a bit more about the life in Parliament that you guys encountered after the campaign itself, which is when you were writing these very cool diaries for us, which you can read on.
I think that's so cute.
We put up here in the room, for people who are listening to this and can't see it, some photos from the candidate diaries themselves. And Chloe said, "Have you gone through our social media?" And I said, no, those are the photos you provided.
What were we thinking?
Mark Zuckerberg has license through, right? What do you guys think about when you cast your mind back to that campaign? Kiri, starting with you, a lot happened, right? You had a baby along the way as well. The leader changed. What do you when you think back to that campaign? What is your impression of it?
It was It was huge. It was life-changing. Yeah, we had a kid on the way, like probably just a little bit of advice to budding politicians. Maybe don't do both of those things in the same year, but whatever. Don't want to discourage anything either. It was a bit of a ride, though. Taking a 3-day-old baby into, like, union meetings. Yeah. But that's cool.
Don't go to union meetings.
The union was like, yeah! Go, baby. No, look, it was really dynamic. It was such an intense campaign. We'd had, the government, national government had been in for 9 years. I felt like there was a lot at stake, that New Zealand sort of was ready, but we were sort of doing these 360 things, as you guys ended up doing as well during that political campaign. So it was a lot of it was tumultuous. It's how it felt. But as a brand new candidate living out in the East Coast, there wasn't a lot of people who were, it's not like being in the city. So my electorate's like 6 hours just to go from one side to the other. So, you're rallying up the fire faithful. We're on the ground. It was awesome. It was door knocking. It was grassroots. It was boots on the ground, stuff that makes your heart sore. You got to see the insides of people's lives that would crush you and just make you go, yes, this is your why. And it was reaffirmed every single day. So I love that. I love campaigning because I love our people. And I love feeling like you can be a useful and effective sort of, loudspeaker in various different places. So that kind of component was epic. And probably went in with a lot of wide eyes, bushy tail, and the whole time just going, what is going?
Let's make a podcast.
You just looked at Chloe when you said you guys went through something too, and I'm guessing you were talking about the Metiria situation. Is that, Chloe, when you think back, how large does that loom in the memory of that campaign period? Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Man, it was emotional. The largest phone calling night that we had arranged to date happened on the night that Met announced her resignation. And we had, 50-odd people in our office in Auckland Central, just off of Karangahape Road. And we were all tuned into the 6 o'clock news, and that happened. And then we all kind of crashed. And we're like, yeah, we can't do phone calling anymore. We're going to bank that. And having a few conversations with Met during that time in that process, there's one thing that she said which kind of stuck in my mind, and I think it was a day or two thereafter that I actually ended up being on another panel with Kiri, where I reused exactly that statement from Metiria, which is that no one person is bigger than the kaupapa. You have to keep moving forward. If we have a movement that lives or dies on the shoulders of one person, then that's not a sustainable movement. It's not a movement, So yeah, it was gnarly. And I don't know if I've still necessarily worked through all of that trauma. So yeah, it was a hardcore campaign. And it was, the highs and lows of emotions. And it was the rallying, like Kiri said, you were constantly reminded day after day talking to people, and it's still the same every single day in this role when we talk to people who are having trouble getting housing or through the immigration system or any of these other systems where a computer says no and doesn't recognise their individual circumstances, or have empathy for the fact that they might not know how to communicate for or advocate for themselves through all of those layers of bureaucracy. Yeah, you're reminded of why you do it.
Erica, your party, by contrast, had the same leader through the course of the campaign.
For that election, yes.
No replacement.
This kind of feels like that dinner party. That scene in Notting Hill where they're all trying to get their worst tale of woe to get the last piece of brownie? Like, luxury for you guys. I had 4 leaders in 1 year. I get the brownie.
You get the brownie, sister. You get the brownie.
I mean, maybe it's group therapy.
Are we paying you for this? This is feeling a little cathartic.
It's quite raw.
And then you guys came first. So you had the same leader and you came first and you also lost.
And then we lost. I remember being on a flight because they announced the decision of what Winston was going to do, and I happened to be on a flight from Wellington to Auckland at the time, and it happened while we were in the air. And as we as soon as we landed, the pilot came over the loudspeaker and he went with Labour. And it was just, that's it. Not welcome to a new, nothing. He went with Labour. And there was one guy at the back of the plane that went, woo! Everybody else was like, oh.
All the seats at the front, the Koru seats. In the back of the
I'll never forget that. You went with Labour.
Tell me about the campaign, though, generally. What's your memory of that period?
Look, I had campaigned twice for Macaulay. And so I kind of knew what I was doing. It was very formulaic. It's a small postage stamp of an electorate compared to what Kiri has to travel through. It's here are all the touch points. This is what you have to do. Here are all your volunteers. Macaulay left us with a great team and enough money to campaign, and we'd raised some ourselves. So that was pretty straightforward. I just remember, I was relatively newish to the party. I'd done a lot for Macaulay, but I hadn't interacted with a lot of the MPs, and I remember seeing like Nikki Kay and Judith Collins and being like, oh my God. I was sort of starstruck by all these people that I hadn't met before. It was a relatively straightforward campaign.
Right.
There was nothing that kind of went awry, or it was what we'd done for Macaulay in the past sort of supercharged. So nothing.
And then what about election night? I mean, I remember distinctly the Herald on Sunday front page the next day. I say distinctly, I can't remember what the headline was, but the headline, it was Bill English with his arms raised, and it was something like New Zealand turns blue. The light turns blue. It was something that was quite unambiguously victory for National. Yeah, was that the vibe? Was that the mood in the team?
Yep, I remember at the Browns Bay Bowling Club, and the results came in, and we thought, well, that's it. It wasn't 100%, but we thought with that majority at 44, then that we had a really good chance.
And what do you think to the thesis that is sometimes proffered, that was part of the pain that was endured in the years to come, was not properly recovering from that, getting over that?
Oh, possibly. But there are a lot of other things going on.
We've got time.
Give us a shopping list. I think it was all played out in the media. I don't think there's anything I'm going to say that will be of any surprise to you. There was lots of other things going on. But of course there was that expectation, and then it sort of got yanked out from underneath us, and we'll probably see a little bit for a while. But it was probably in a way good for us, because it meant that we were all sort of down on the same level again, like all of those senior cabinet ministers, because we were quite stratified when you've got senior cabinet ministers who, you don't have the time to talk to the backbench MPs. Suddenly we were all on the same level, and that was quite good.
Right.
It did take a while to work things out, you're right. And I don't know if that was to do with the election or with all the other personality things that were going on.
So in terms of your kind of first days in Parliament, once it got up and going after that decision was made by Winston Peters, the party rather, did that change the way that you kind of integrated into it, because you weren't falling into a hierarchy as much as you would have been otherwise, do you think?
Yeah, no, that was definitely true. We were all suddenly on the same level. But there was a weird sense of unease, because it felt like, and I don't know what other MPs would agree with me, but it felt like Bill English wasn't going to last. And it was kind of this weird secret that no one talked about. And so there was this weird sense of, when are things going to change? How are they going to change? Who's it going to be? But it wasn't really talked about. And so it was a really uneasy period. Trying to figure out, why we lost, and then, what's going to happen now.
What do you remember, Chloe, of those first days going into that institution? And it's weird,
going into
arcane,
the institution. It's a great way to describe it.
Yeah.
I remember that it was like school, and that there were bells that told us where we had to be.
Yeah.
And yeah, I remember Kiri and I both got vox pops by the media, doorstops going in and talking about how it's like Hogwarts and all that kind of stuff. But one of the things, I thought we had to draft our own bills. So I was stoked when I learned about PCO. I
didn't realise we had to sit till 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
That was new.
Yeah.
New information.
No,
How would you not know that?
Yeah. Well, I also, one of the weirdest things, like when people ask me about just, what's one of the unexpected things about Parliament, actually one of the weirdest things is the unanticipated amount of power in the House program and control of the order paper. So we debate things and, for first reading, second reading, committee of the whole and third reading, there are different allocations of speeches, but they're between 5 and 10 minutes. And you can use up all of that time or you can do obviously a far shorter speech. And when you have between 10 and 12 speeches on each of those readings, except for committee of the whole is the only time when you can do what's called filibustering, a term that's far more comfortable in America, but basically it's just extending the amount of time that you're debating this thing so that you delay other things coming up. That's been a really interesting thing to learn about, particularly for the likes of members' days and trying to negotiate and finding time to negotiate other things that are happening behind the scenes. So the only time that I've ever engaged in filibustering was actually on Simeon Brown's psychoactive substances amendment legislation, where I think I did a solid 2.5 hours, including on the title and commencement clause, giving it a range of names and commencement dates and all of the other things and putting forward a bunch of SOPs. But that was all to buy time to negotiate the Misuse of Drugs Act amendments around Section 7 to police discretion and otherwise. So that's kind of one of the weirdest things that I recall about learning, is just that actually it's not that there is these really set times and ways that you negotiate things through, but whoever controls that order paper, there's a benefit to the way that you're then trying to negotiate things behind the scenes.
The House, what I learned is the House has a life of its own, and you can speed it up and slow it down. Yeah. And you'll remember, because you're a backbencher, when we first started, these guys had a really light order paper, so not that many bills. And so these poor, brand new MPs, watching them having to do 10-minute speeches on bills they had no idea about.
Dog Control Act.
And I am proud to like to thank the Select Committee
and the Speaker. Actually, I remember this one official.
And then there's National getting up going, terrible bill, we don't support it, sit down. And then watching these guys just sweating. I remember Chris Hipkins came down to the House and he was debating whether or not there should be this was the committee stage. Should there be an and here or should we remove that? And a 10-minute speech. It's brilliant. But we just filibustered the Fair Pay Act. I did 9 hours filibustering that bill. 9 solid hours. Me and Goldie, boy, I had a medal for that.
For democracy.
Yeah. Well, it turns out I was actually going through this the other day because one of my favourite themes of parliamentary debates is when people stand up and say this is a waste of time and then spend 10 minutes talking about how it's a waste of time. There's parliamentary library research from the 2011 to 2014 term, which is obviously a gross estimate, but it's that for every sitting minute of Parliament, it's $5,500 of taxpayer money. So for all of those MPs that were making that point, I said, in filling your 10 minutes, $50K of taxpayer dollars, kapai.
You need to write it on a sign, one of the visual aids of Parliament. There's another subculture. Kiri, were you made Labour junior whip straight away?
Yeah.
So you were straight into that weird,
we got sworn
abstruse world. I mean,
it's like election was like the 17th or something of September, I think, and then we would have been down in Wellington and sworn in. I don't know, about within the next couple of weeks. And I know that I was a whip in October, and I remember my phone was going off from the chief whip, and I thought, why would a chief whip want to ring a backbench MP? To tell you off. You're in trouble. You're in trouble. I remember didn't see it. Didn't see it. And then I was going around, why is Ruth Dyson calling me? No, not answering it. And so anyway, I went into caucus and she still was out. She's like, Kiri, I've been trying to ring you. I was like, oh, gee. How can I help? She's like, I'm going to ask you to whip. I said, oh, good. What's a whip? Yeah, you can tell like that my life story is really planned, and there's a lot of thought that goes into most of these decisions. But so myself, Kieran McAnulty and Ruth Dyson, we were the original whip team for the Labour government, and that is where I learned to do all of the stuff that these guys are talking about. So our job was essentially to manage the House. We managed the order paper. We ran the politic of the House, timing, negotiations. It meant that having to have quite collegial relationships with the National Party whips, Green Party whips, musterers. That's non-violent terms.
Yeah, kaupapa.
Well, it is true though, isn't it? The whip is quite a violent term.
Yeah.
I mean,
we're an ecosystem, not a hierarchy.
Yeah.
There's a reason I didn't join the group.
I've heard at your party conferences there's like hours-long debate as to why the plates aren't recyclable. Is that true?
Yeah, and there was once a mass walkout because the diet had been slowly turning more vegetarian.
There's a good bit in Gareth Hughes' book about Jeanette Fitzsimons in which he describes someone wanting to put a motion at I can't remember whether it's Values Party or the Green Party for co-leaders, and every member of the party would be a co-leader.
Obviously.
That's
Did you not see that just happen?
I saw some pretty lengthy delays in not standing for co-leader statements.
We're very deliberative democracy.
Come on, Chloe. Go, Chloe.
2017 Spinoff Diaries. Bring everyone together.
Erica, I don't want to dwell on this too long, but there were some tricky years there.
You should circle back.
What do you do? What do you as a backbench MP, and you did, as far as I'm aware, just crack on with policy stuff. But how do you? That must have been hell.
It was. There were some caucus meetings that were so horrific that I sat there wringing my hands, looking at the floor, going, "Oh, this needs to be over. This needs to be over." It was horrific, and it was a lot of them. But the thing is, you can't get involved in it. You've got to just get on with your own work. But it was rough. Even recently with. And Todd Muller's a really great friend of mine. He's a wonderful man, and just watching that happen, and it was awful. Yeah. It was awful. But the great thing is that it's all behind us, and we're moving on. And that doesn't happen anymore.
There's an election next year.
No, it was. Look, Labour's been through it. We've all been there. It's the wilderness, right? After you've had 9 long years in government, and then suddenly. You're out in your ear, and you've got to rebuild. And we, and like every party, we just don't do succession planning very well. You guys didn't, we didn't, and then you end up with exactly what's happened.
At least in New Zealand, the last 40 years or so, we've had the decency to do it when parties are in opposition rather than in government in the UK, right?
Yeah,
that's something.
That's true.
At least do the disemboweling while you're in the opposition benches. Chloe, I remember talking to you a number of times. You wrote some things, and you felt quite disenchanted for some periods there. I think
every week, or
well, I don't know. I'm trying to remember the timing of particularly. Maybe it was towards the end of the first term. I don't know, but I think is it fair to say you were thinking seriously about whether or not to go again?
Yeah, I'm flippant in saying that it happens every week, but it genuinely does happen pretty much every week.
Yeah.
But there are definitely some days where it feels a lot tougher. Like, I was actually having a chat to my good friend Tui's dad, Jono, over the Christmas break in Littleton, where it turns out fucking everyone has a boat. I don't know. Anyway, we're on his boat, and this ramshackle boat. And I was watching him fix it, and everyone else was doing busy things, and I was there for my wisdom from the Oracle. And I was just complaining to him about how I hate so much of the system and the institution that, we're inside of, because in the chamber, climate change doesn't exist, poverty doesn't exist, and everyone's just delivering Shakespearean soliloquies based on how long their whip has told them to talk for. And that feels very disenchanting. But then you go out, particularly into the electorate, and you engage with people, and you solve some problems, and you get some proof of concept, and you mobilise people, and you give some people some hope, and you can build on that. And that's the stuff which kind of re-energises me. But I was talking to Jono about kind of that that tug of war, especially after that 107-day lockdown in Tamaki, where it had been really gnarly and challenging mentally as well, to be honest. And he was talking about this documentary that was made, which I was in.
I heard about that.
Yep. Which there's a line in it where I'm being interviewed and I say, politics is fucked. And he was like, I had two thoughts after watching that. The first is that you're a really fucking good politician because you can say something that's so manipulative and that people will get on side with and see that you're authentic and genuine and, you're delivering it in that way. The second thought is that, if there is authenticity and, a sense of genuineness to that statement, then that's really sad. And that's a really, really sad space for particularly a young person to be in and to navigate through on a daily basis. And as we were talking through it, he kind of helped me realise that there are parts of it that, I genuinely do love, and that is the problem-solving stuff that all of us have kind of alluded to and spoken about. It kind of also feels, I guess, as I get older and more mature, that it's just so petty to complain about it in that way, there's such a privilege to doing this job. So I'm still navigating all of that stuff, and I still do get very cynical and very disenchanted. But the way that I've kind of framed up that I do my job now is that I'm very effectively annoying. I'm very good at picking an issue and running with it and finding every single possible avenue to keep that issue alive. And in doing that, there's some kind of sense of success that you feel in being creative. So that's fun. Yeah.
Thank you. Kiri, on March the 5th, 2021, that was, I think, the day of the tsunami, and you were looking like the coolest person on the planet in that zip-up black top, being the emergency management minister. And the whole country was really impressed with you. But there was some stuff we didn't know. Are you happy to talk about this? What else? I mean, you tell the story. There was another massive thing, emergency happening for you.
Yeah. So that morning, I was scheduled to go in for a test in the Women's Centre at Wellington Hospital because I had basically not stopped menstruating for quite some time, and it was quite significant, and I was quite crook by that point. And I'd been getting tests and everything was sort of showing up clear, etc. But my colleague, Aisha Viral, I told her about probably only 3 or 4 days prior. I said to her, look, man, this thing's still going on. I don't really go to doctors. I don't enjoy that side of things. So I just was talking to my mate who was an ex-doctor, said, is this normal? Am I all good? She was like, she looked at me sort of quite ashen, and she was like, I'm saying this to you as a friend. I really need you to go to the Women's Centre and get tested urgently. I was just like, fuck, that's a bit of a tone to take. Okay, doctor. So that's what I'd been planning on doing that morning. But, yeah, my phone started going off at about, I can't remember now, it was about 2 or 3 in the morning. And my office and I were making these calls like, oh, apparently it's really important. We've got to go get this test. Or let's see how far we can delay it, and let's see what we can do that morning to try and just manage the tsunami thing. We can knock a few things out. Made a line call. I'd done all the morning media rounds, which took us to about 8 o'clock. Like, yep, okay, let's do it. Jumped in the Crown car, zoomed to the hospital, and my phone's just blowing up. And I remember saying to the receptionist, I was like, see that lady on the screen there talking about the tsunami? She's like, yeah, it's me. What's sort of like the time frames and how can I... Because I'm sweet, I just need to know whether I can duck out. Like, how can we manage it? So, I ended up doing most of my interviews either in the waiting room, but the coolest one was where I had my legs up, I had my iPods kind of connected in. Oh, we've got this photo of me. I'm giving a live, it was a cat and that catting little doing little thing. I'm like, yeah. So look, we just really need to be assured that everybody... Yeah, that was a vibe. Look, we found out the results shortly thereafter. I can't really remember the sequence, but I was coming up to Auckland, actually. It must have been within that week. I was actually due to speak at an event with Helen Clark and John Key. And so we'd kind of whipped away. We'd been having, by this stage, it's sort of been going in and out because we had to do more and more tests, and everybody was, so nobody could work out what was going on. I remember I jumped off the plane in Auckland, so here, and just before you go through these little doors to take you into the airport proper, you're on the domestic kind of airport side of it. My phone was ringing. I was like, oh, it's the doctor lady. All right, I just swung off, took the call. I was like, yeah, g'day, it's Kiri. She's like, hey, Kiri, your test results are back and you've tested positive for cancer, or whatever she said. I was just like, what? So I was just like sort of started crumbling on the floor over here. And I had this beautiful, she was a parliamentary secretary, so not a political staff, a public official was with me. And I was just like, she's like, are you okay? I was like, ugh. So she whisked me off to the car. Sort of lost things by that point. And she just managed my entire, she cancelled everything, got me in a car, got me to my parents, came up, looked after me. Well, I sort of fell apart. But it was an interesting period of time. Don't recommend it again. But if you're going to go through something like that, I was incredibly grateful for a living public health system and got to see it firsthand in a way I hadn't really seen it before. I was, like many New Zealanders, sitting out in the A&E beds because I was going in and out all the time for hours, and you're seeing the real life stress that like these people are under, and you're going, goodness gracious me. So I got to see things I wouldn't otherwise seen. Confronted mortality, quite face up. They did think I was going to cark it for a good period there. My main doctor didn't think that, ever. Quite a few other people did. She's like, no, we've got this. I was like, yeah, okay, so it is. Through that duration of that period, I was seeing a psychologist for the entire time and preparing to die. And that's an interesting experience to go through as a young mother, somebody who had just started in my parliamentary career. I'd been a minister for goodness gracious me, like 6 months, not even that, 3, 4, 5 months, something like that. And so just being confronted with this real prospect, okay, everything you thought was going to happen isn't. And then anyway, we kind of got through all that, and now here we are. But one thing I just want to kind of pick up from both of the sisters that they both said, and look, that was a personal journey that we went through, but all of us, I think, I don't know if I can say this on behalf of you guys, can say it for yourself. This job, I think, brings you to, it really pushes you to your limit, spiritually, physically, mentally. It's a very uncomfortable environment. I think some people come in and feel automatically relatively comfortable. It's a domain and sphere people find comfort in. We who have these conversations all the time, we feel out of place. We don't fit the mold. We're not from that place. It doesn't sound like us. There's nothing about that place that is familiar even 5 years on, even as a minister, and you've got all these public, servants. Nothing about that place feels like it's at all ordinary or normal or common. So it is a challenge to be in that environment all the time. I sort of talk about the waidua side of it. Spiritually, I just like my feet. I've constantly got to ground my feet in this job. Chloe's absolutely right. Every single day you chuck your boots on, you feel like it is an absolute privilege, and it is a heartbreaking privilege. I don't think that you can separate the two out. So, yeah, it's interesting. People don't know about this, but there's a lot of camaraderie that goes in across the house. Me and her, we're in scraps all the time in the house, and rightly so for our policies and politics. That's fine. But behind that, we will sit together and cry sometimes because it's just that rubbish. And you've got to, that's a part of the human side of politics, I think.
Are you curious about how business can be better? I'm Simon Pound, and I host Business is Boring, a podcast where I cordial with some of the most interesting people in entrepreneurship, commerce, and making things happen. Tune in to Business is Boring every Tuesday, brought to you by the Spinoff Podcast Network in partnership with Spark Business Lab.
Talofa Lover. I'm Madeline Chapman, editor at The Spinoff. If you have the means, consider supporting our high-quality journalism by becoming a Spinoff member. Sign up now at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
Kia ora, I'm Duncan Grieve, founder of The Spinoff. You can help us keep all of The Spinoff's award-winning journalism free for everybody by becoming a member today at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
Is that your experience too, Erica? Is it? I mean, politicians say this a lot. Oh, what you see in the House is not the real thing. And some of us who have, met a number of politicians that say that's broadly true. People do get on, they jump in a cab together or have a drink at some event together. Is that your experience? And I guess the other part to that is that okay? Is it okay to have this kind of theatre on one front and then the getting on behind the scenes?
I think so. I mean, I absolutely agree with everything that Kiri said about how the place is and how it doesn't fit with us. But you're right, there is the theatre and we go hell for leather at each other, although the three of us, I mean, Kiri and I are usually laughing at each other across the house.
We're texting each other.
So, yeah, you'll be answering a question in Parliament. I'm heckling her and texting her at the same time. But you're right, behind the scenes.
We OIA there?
Probably. But if you didn't get on behind the scenes, you'd go mad. Look, there are some of your mates I probably wouldn't have a drink with, but probably some of mine you wouldn't either. You drive you mad otherwise. You have to. So it's good, that part of it, but also you need to get along to get bills passed and get work done in select committee. And if you didn't, it would just be a big shit fight the whole time, and that's not great. So select committee is good to actually improve bills, even ones we don't agree with. We still make them better.
But it's like real life. Like you have to work. If you want a neighbourhood to work, if you want a community to work, you have to figure out how to work with people that you disagree with a lot of the time or some of the time. So, yeah, it's exactly the same thing. And I think what you're touching on, Toby, particularly in terms of the performance of the House, is that fit for purpose in terms of the kind of rule-making process that we want for sake of the constitution of this country and the way that we progress and evolve and develop. No, it's not the best way to do that stuff. It would be far better if we had a far more collaborative approach, but doing so would mean completely upturning our Westminster kind of colonial system, and I'm all for that. I'm Minister of Justice.
It does
for you too.
Just start with the alcohol sponsorship and then we'll do the whole system.
That's one thing I did want to say, though. Yeah, so yes, there is a bit of theatre, and I kind of treat everything in life like rugby, because rugby makes sense. But you've got teams, you're on a pitch, you're there to do a job, and you're there to score tries, and there's rules, and everybody signs up knowing what the rules of engagement are, right? But off the pitch, you do go down to the club, you do have a beer, and you acknowledge the other side for what they've done well and where they haven't, or whatever it is. And relationships are critical. And in my role, in justice particularly, I make a lot of law. There's a lot of law that comes through my office, and it impacts everybody. The more I have bipartisan or cross-party support to ensure that it's going to be enduring, the more confident I can feel in, taking that through. And so I'm constantly working, particularly with, I've probably had you in my office like 3 times this week. You. Yep, and I've had, many of there's quite a few of your colleagues that are in my office, and we're working through details, and then they'll sledge me the next day in the House, and that's fine. There's a thing about it that's acceptable to me, because they'll be raising issues, and I'll be then going to my officials. Are there ways that I can... Is there a real policy issue here that we can fix? What's the vulnerability in the proposal that we're proffering? And do I need to do something to make this piece of law better? And I do think that that's something, I don't know if that's just outside the House. I'm sure you would have seen that when your government was in as well. But I think that that's an appropriate way to make law.
Well, you do that probably quite well. Some ministers don't.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, I've been battling with Michael Wood over the nurses on the 2-year pathway to residence for
Michael.
Months.
Just saying.
It's going to be better if you go, I like Mike. That's just going to be better. We can,
on transport. Anyway, sorry, Erica. Very important immigration stuff.
I love Michael.
Yeah.
One more bleak place we'll go to, and then we'll turn it up and be more uplifting.
We're in the trenches, man. We'll stop crying.
I mean, I do think we sort of maybe touched on this a little bit, but the toxicity of politics isn't just within politics; it's also coming from outside politics.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a thing I saw on a social network called Twitter the other day.
I deleted that from my phone.
So did I.
Yeah.
Did you?
I have an app that
that's
makes
a good
me
idea.
breathe before I open it. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I can show you.
Wow.
Yeah.
It was a mental health tip that I got given, and my mental health is better.
My husband banned me from it. Like, same thing. He said, you're going to end up doing something bad if you keep to stay on Twitter, so I'm off.
Anyway, yes, we know
Carry on.
that. We know that.
We've heard of it. Yeah.
You had sent a message to, I think, your mum, Kiri.
Yes, I did. Yes.
And she was obviously had responded. I didn't even see the thread, but obviously there was some bile that was going on in the thread. And you said to her, Mama, love you, don't read it and don't let all this sort of stuff stress you out, kiss, kiss, which was very sweet. There's a little, had a little moment there. But it is, you also wrote, Kiri, in your one of your diaries about how your skin was growing thicker already dealing with this new intense thing. And of course, some of that is par for the course. I guess my question is whether over those 5 years it's got worse, whether some of what happened in COVID, general, that social network I talked about, and others, whether you guys feel as though it's worse now than it was in 2017.
I think it's just worse because we're all more high profile. No one ever said anything about me on Twitter in 2017. No one knew who I was. Yeah. But now, because I'm saying stuff about the government and their bad policies in immigration or education or whatever, and then people just feel like they can get really personal. I had one amazing email the other day about a woman who was complaining about something that was relatively reasonable, so I started reading it. And then she went on to say that, and your hair's too long and you're obviously a daddy's girl and you've got men issues because women your age and who are going to get, down to real work should cut their hair. I put it on Facebook. It's like, that's my best ever post. Yeah. Everyone commented. So now I'm growing my hair.
I did that over lockdown.
I think once you start, I think people think that you're fair game because you put yourself in this position and therefore they can be awful to you. And you should just deal with it because you're asking for it, which is awful. I hate reading that stuff. I don't mind people saying, no, you're totally wrong because you got your facts wrong, or this is wrong, or that's fine. I can deal with that and I can come back and go, well, actually, But when they start being really personal, it's awful. It's not nice. And it's bad for your mental health.
Yeah, I'd say I'm way less on Twitter than I was 5 years ago. What's actually far more concerning for me is that I have definitely seen a transcendence from the online place into the real world.
Oh, yeah.
So there's yes. I've been loath to talk about it kind of in the media because it can then I feel generate kind of copycat stuff. But it's getting a lot grosser, Toby. Like I am really genuinely concerned about the election next year and the environment. That we're in. Like a dude on the street the other day. Who was with his family, normal looking guy. I was just sat doing some emails in the middle of the city, started yelling, "Communist!" at me. And I look up and I'm like, what on earth is going on? Is this man okay? And he keeps going. So I asked him very reasonably, what do you think communism means? And he was like, it's state control of everything. And I was like, well, actually, that's authoritarianism. What you're talking about is an economic system. He didn't want to hear that. So
he was not up for an intellectual debate.
So he kept yelling at me. And I just tried to kind of, stay calm. And as you do in that situation, you try and de-escalate it because he was standing there, chest puffed out. His wife had kept walking with the pram. I assume it's his wife. I apologise for assuming random man on the street. But his kid had come and stood beside him and was imitating his body language. And I just had to stand there and kind of decompress and be like, okay, cool, thank you. And then, afterwards just try and disengage from that. And it really shook me in a way that I haven't been shaken by any of the online stuff, like when it gets into that physical space, because I get it. And like Erica's kind of alluded to how when you're in this space, and particularly when the things that you say are amplified through the media is a medium, and therefore you become detached from your individual self. You're a concept, and people can critique that concept. And that's all, we do to a certain extent, absolutely sign up for that. But when it becomes very targeted and very individualized, and it's not actually a rational or a good faith discussion or debate, we're in a pretty difficult place at the moment. And I have all of the same greenie prescriptions that I would to all of our social ills to resolve it, which is we just need to turn down the temperature and start having some, community building, some genuine community building, and start getting back to that.
So we're not seeing that. I'm not seeing that. And I thought when, Jacinda had been talking about wanting to peel back the public appearances because she's worried about safety, I thought, that's just her not wanting to have that comparison between, say, 2017 and 2020 when she was loved to now when she's not so loved, as much as she was before. But actually, now talking to these guys, I realise it's actually a thing. There are death threats, and we don't see that. So it's hard to understand, but I feel like from talking to you guys, it is the temperature is raised, and there is more of that.
And I just really feel for my staff as well. My staff are at the front lines dealing with this stuff, primarily in the electorate office and on the phones, and they screen a lot of emails now for me as well. There's real people at the end of this stuff, and it's really challenging.
Jeez.
Kiri, Claire Szabo at the Labour conference the other day, the outgoing president, was talking in a very serious and depressing fashion about how everyone gearing up for the next election should have a safety officer who is in every electorate who's looking out for this sort of stuff.
Yeah, oddly, I agree. I always think, we can kind of go a bit heavy-handed. But no, I think that the political environment that we're in, there's a fractured sense of community and out there at the moment, and that's something that we need to really, in my view, collectively across the House, whatever roles we're in actually, is heal the rift that has really occurred in our social fabric over the last couple of years. These last couple of years have been very hard. Did I write in 2017 as to, you get, thicker skin, etc. That's completely correct. And I honestly, there's so much vitriolic rubbish that goes on this thing. That means nothing to me anymore. The thing that does get me a little bit, though, is when I'm with my children and I am threatened. Even by myself, I don't mind. I mean, I can manage that. But it's when I'm with my kids. And that upped the temperature over the past year to the extent people were following you. I would have to park in public places and literally wait and have 111 on your phone and those types of things. That stuff when you're by yourself is actually okay. But if you've got little kids in your car and they're seeing you or they see you scared, or not scared, but just right, that's not kind of something I think is acceptable. A lot, in my weekends I try to spend as much time as I can with my kids, usually doing worky stuff, but at least you're out. But I just remember this one engagement. I was at a Bunnings and, got the kids with the bloody sausages and they got tomato sauce over there and we're running through trying to get, nails or whatever it is that we're doing. And just literally being kind of cornered in by two people who were very aggrieved around mandates, but locking us in, myself, my partner, and our two kids at the end of a row in Bunnings, and having it's interesting. You just kind of have to, and that incident's not isolated. I think I just found that one a little bit egregious because I didn't quite know how to manage it with my babies. But I don't like that. I don't like that that's become the state of New Zealand. Like I said, the thing that I find most energising about why we all do this job is because we give a damn about our people. I'm a real grassroots politician. I love being on the ground. I love our people. It's where I get my energy from. But yeah, something's changed. And I think there is a little bit in what Erica said. Yeah, people know more who we are, etc. That's probably very true. And I've got my big ugly face on my truck, which I took it off.
I took mine off.
Yeah, I took it off. I just put it back on though. I was like, oh gosh, people don't know when I've been somewhere. It's such a big electric. God, they think I'm not doing any work. But yeah, no, I think that we do have to become collectively more conscientious across the board about how we're looking after our volunteers. I've always been mindful about my volunteers on the ground. We've got some particular socioeconomics in various parts of my community, so we've always had a bit of a sense and a watch over. But I've got a lot of elderly in my campaign team who can't deal with the violence and the vitriol in the same ways that I can, and nor do I want them to be. I get a lot of young people, because we don't have a university, but I get a lot of high school students join and want to help out. I don't know that I want to expose many kids to that side of people if I can help prevent that. So I'm definitely doing a lot of thinking about how I'm going to be managing my campaign next year. I think it will look different. But, there's something about that just being on the ground, and we're doing a lot of thinking about how we can retain that real guts of the way that we do politics in New Zealand. It's always been open door, and we love that.
And no one wants to lose that, right? That we don't want to become a kind of high security political machine that you see in other countries. Well, thank you for sharing that. Let's just talk about good things now. We can
change the world. We can turn it on.
With the full 3 parts.
Are we supposed to join in? Because that's not happening.
I'm bad at karaoke.
2 things I've learned as a politician: you never sing and you never dance, because a meme follows immediately. Why don't you know that?
Erica, tell me 5 years in Parliament. What's the stuff that's been most satisfying? Not necessarily the most changing of the world stuff, and you've been in opposition all those 5 years, but what's been the most satisfying? The stuff where you kind of go home and you think, this is a good job, this is important.
Migrant nurses. We went into that pandemic, and there were nurses in this country who were split because they had to come and do a course before they could get registered. You can't bring your families when you do that, so we had thousands of nurses in this country who'd come to do their course and left their young children, often their babies, at home. And then we went through the pandemic, and they were working at the front line and without their families. And I got the portfolio that I wanted that portfolio, and we just went hard. I went hard, and I learned, because I had my background in reality TV. Because the media and reality TV are very similar. So I know how they think. I know what the hooks they want. It felt a bit awkward doing it, but I got nurses crying on the news every night, holding up pictures of the kids they hadn't seen in 18 months. And I worked every channel, every radio station. I just went on and on and on, and I did not give up. And I asked the minister in the House uncomfortable questions day after day after day. And we got a policy change. And it took a while, but mid-last year they allowed them to reunite with their families. And I got sent videos of these women at the airport that they would film for me, or their husbands would. Someone would film them reuniting with their children for the first time in 18 months. And it was so freaking cool. I'm like, that's why I'm here. Even in opposition, I got a policy change. And it was relentless, and I'm so freaking proud of that. And I just think, and then they flipped on teachers as well. They did the same thing. There's still split families. We've still got the same problem, but it was at that moment, and I still get them sending me messages and giving really powerful speeches in the House and speaking to a whole lot of protesters outside, the split family protesters. That was the thing. And I remember Chris Bishop leaned over to me in the House and he said, "This is going to make your career." And I leaned back to him and I said, "I'm not doing this for my career, mate. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do." And I remember getting up and I gave this speech. It was Mother's Day. It had just been Mother's Day. And I didn't do any posting because I was like, I've just been dealing with these mothers who haven't seen their kids in 18 months. How can I celebrate Mother's Day? And I gave a speech, a general debate speech where I talked about that. And I remember, I won't name him, but as a Labour MP yelling across the House, "You're just doing this for the votes." And I was like, shot back at him. These people can't vote. They're not residents, they're migrants. Like, what? If I was going to do this for political purposes, it wouldn't be these people. But the thing that I've realised from that is if you always do the right thing for the right reasons, then good things will happen. But I'm so proud of that. That one thing. I did that. Even from opposition. Backbench number 30, I think I was. Don't care. Numbers don't matter,
Thank you. Kiri.
Yeah. And this is why we do the job, right? You get to change the law and you get to allocate resourcing, and the intent is that you get to fundamentally change people's lives for the better. There's some policy stuff which I've loved and which have made me feel immeasurably proud, like Māori electoral options going through right now, which enables you to change roles if you're a Māori voter. The donations law reform that we're doing, that is something that I feel very proud of. But for me, and there's a ton of stuff in the justice space, which is repealing 3 strikes just the other day. That was fantastic. It was the right thing to do. But the things that if I'm being really genuine and honest, the things that I love, it's going to schools and I go and hand out the lunches in schools with all the kids, because I know that most of the kids in my electorate, we don't have high decile schools. Most of my schools are low decile schools, and they didn't have food, and I talked to the teachers about what it means to teach those kids after lunchtime. It's a radically different experience. It's people coming up, or it's really it's little things in my electorate, with my electorate office. And my electorate team do so much of this work. I get to bask in their glory sometimes, or in the joy that they bring to others people's lives. It's the amount of people, kids that we've gotten to decent homes, new builds. We've got a lot of homes that have been built in the East Coast. Got a project underway at the moment, building 200 homes with the iwi provider up in Gizzy. There was a mum at the AMP show that hit me up the other day. It was a teacher of a mum. They'd been struggling to get this young boy and his solo parent into a house forever, and they'd been living in some horrific circumstances. It's the faces that linger with you from the things that you're doing. So, it's like I'm too a nerd, and I love doing all the constitutional reform. I love doing law reform, the policy work. But it's the people and it's the faces that are etched into my memory of the lives that we've touched. So, yeah, that's why you can sort of, even on the hardest and the worst days, and you're just clinging on by your fingernails are scratched right to the ground and you're feeling really raw, somebody will just go, bro, remember X, and you're going, yeah, stay the course, and we believe in what we're doing. So, yeah, but it's been a huge week, bro.
Thank you. Chloe?
I didn't come into Parliament to talk about drugs, but I've ended up doing a lot of that. And I think the reason for that, so I originally inherited the Medicinal Cannabis Members Bill from Julianne when she became a minister, when we formed government at the end of 2017, and we were looking around the caucus table and just going, who would want to take on her Members Bill, because the minister can't progress a Members Bill. And I was like, okay, we'll figure that out. And through that process, just being reminded of some things actually that I learned back when I snuck into Kylie Quince's law classes in Crim about, the reversal of the burden of proof under the Misuse of Drugs Act, and a range of other things that I think make our drug laws the most kind of profound example of injustice and illogic and anti-evidence legislation on our statute books. So while obviously
there's a fair bit of...
Yeah, there's a bit. Yeah, I mean,
fair bit.
The constitutional basis and the Westminster system. But in terms of the kind of day-to-day, and particularly the application of the law, because if you take into account that 635,000 New Zealanders used cannabis in the last year, a few thousand were prosecuted for use alone. Anyway, I think... it's very easy to forget, particularly with the flashpoint of the 2020 referendum, just how much work has been done over the last 5 years on this issue alone, with amendments to MOTA. So the Section 7 changes in police discretion, while they definitely don't go the full hog and anywhere near far enough, they have reduced drastically the amount of people who are getting dragged through the criminal justice system. There was, of course, drug checking, which was, a long fight, and I want to acknowledge Wendy Ellison for that. Know Your Stuff, who spent, several years risking arrest in order to build the mandate and the evidence base to continue pushing for that. So, a real highlight being able to help champion that through Parliament. Then, obviously on the alcohol stuff with me mate, Kiritapu Allan, we've managed to put that very clearly on the agenda, and with that kind of year and a half kind of campaign and rallying the troops and working with those who've been doing this for over a decade in the community, it's happening and it's going to happen now. So I feel like that's helped to reframe the discussion around drugs, and we're in a different place than I think we ever have been. And hopefully right on time for us to look at some commitments from all political parties for the Misuse of Drugs Act 1975 to be binned the election next year. But outside of drugs, the first members bill that I ever passed, and it was actually the first Green Party members bill that ever passed through all stages with complete consensus in the House, first bill to my name, originally drafted by Mojo Mathers, the Election Access Fund Act now. It's a fund that will come into effect in the 2023 election, available to all candidates with disabilities to be able to run barrier-free to pay for those barriers that they face that able-bodied candidates don't. That's huge, and hopefully will bring greater representation of disabled people into our parliament. But then it's the electric stuff. I joke that around half of my job in the electorate is making council do its job.
Yep. Amen, me too.
Yeah, but saving the white lady, the food truck, or white ladies, I don't know. That was really, really cool. And, working with the washer whānau and doing that was awesome. And, the kind of flashpoint that was for identifying that we only have one food truck licence in downtown Auckland and the impacts that then has for alcohol harm, but also things like safety in terms of the surveillance effect and all of these other things. So yeah, it's that on the ground stuff that really keeps you going.
Thank you.
I forgot one, which was really cool. It's the Jobs for Nature Fund. We did a massive pivot to be able to redistribute that out to really small groups up and down the country. So you've got this massive tribe of young people that don't look always like typical conservationists. They come from all walks of life and been raised right now through 4 years of funding, essentially getting a degree in biodiversity, but to love our whenua. And, I talk to a lot of the kids that are on, or young people that are on these programs, and a lot of the kids come off wins and those types of things. But I remember this one boy, because I go see a few of them quite frequently, and, all these young Maribos, head down, but I went back, I kept going sort of visit this one particular program because it was so neat, the work that they're doing. This one boy, by that, sort of 6 months into it, hey miss, like, sup, how's it going? And got talking about the work, and I said, anyway, so why are you still here? Why you still like it? He's like, everyone thinks that we're helping out the, Papa Tuanuku and that we're helping out the taiao. Reality is, she's healing us. And I was like, okay. It's pretty special.
All right, let's wind it up. I teed you up for this, so there's no excuses. Someone who's standing for the first time in 2023, what is your now wise, learned advice for that candidate? Do you want to go first, Eric?
Sure. If you're a woman and you've got children, make sure that it doesn't actually matter, a man or a woman, but especially a woman with children, make sure you've got incredible support. You cannot do this job without your number two. So my husband, Kane, who some people in the room know.
He actually wrote one of your diary entries.
He did. He writes all my jokes and my speeches, so when I sound funny, it's not me, it's actually him. He loves it. He's the jokester. But if I didn't have him, I couldn't do my job. I mean, he does everything at home. And the only thing we ever argue about in life is the fact that I'm not around enough, which is, another thing. But you have to have a rock solid person, especially if you've got kids. And then secondly, your first term, just go nuts in your first term. You'll never get that opportunity again to set the scene of this is what I am and this is what I do. If you screw up your first term, you're out. But if you work really hard in your first term in your electorate and you're out doing everything, people will remember, and you can build a 20, 30-year career off that first 3 years. You've got to be at everything, every opening, everything. But yeah, family support's the most important thing.
Thanks. Kiritapu?
Looking at Chloe.
That's why I asked you.
We were talking about this earlier, and we were reflecting on the question, and the thing that we both said is, don't.
And then realised that wasn't inspirational and aspirational, so we came up with something else.
Yeah, well, why?
Didn't we come up with something positive?
I don't think it was very profound. I mean, look, now that the minister's checked it to me, thanks, Kiri. But yeah, it is the why. I mean, I completely agree with the point that Eric has made about support. One of the diary entries that I remember now writing for you was about how this whole thing would strain any relationship, and I was reflecting then on my relationship with Alex, who I subsequently we've split, but I'm still very good friends with Alex. And I think, that's a really important thing to kind of know and to understand, is that you are under a microscope and under a level of pressure that, I don't think you can understand unless you're in it. But it is the why that'll keep you going when you're really questioning, or when you're really cynical, or when you've had the shittiest day ever. That's the most important thing. So your why might shift and change. The best advice that I ever got, actually I think recorded in another Spinoff podcast with Marilyn Waring, was the advice that she gave me when I reached out to her in 2017, because everybody kept saying to me, if you get elected, you'll be the youngest since Marilyn Waring. And I was like, who is Marilyn Waring? I should find this out. They don't teach political history in our schools. We're working on that now. But Marilyn said, write yourself something, whether it's your maiden speech or a letter or something else cheesy, just something which is a yardstick for who you are when you're making this attempt at doing this thing, and reflect on that whenever you feel in a moment of doubt. And if it's changed and you're comfortable with it, rewrite your damn thing. But if it's changed and you're not comfortable with it, then it's time to go.
Kiri, have you got something to add to that?
Yep.
Inspiration, bro.
Yep.
Yeah.
Going for it.
She's standing on the table now for those.
No, I'd say a few things. First, completely agree with what the crew have said. Have your tira, know who your crew are, and there's different crews. There's the one that you're vulnerable with, and you can be your real self, and that stuff will never change. Keep them tight. And you always need those po in your life, and that will become some of the most important relationships. So just maintain that and set expectations about what you can't do. You will never show up to anything. And just get everybody cool with that pretty early. Secondly is that... your crew on the ground are everything. And that takes a lot of time, exactly what Eric was saying. Invest all your time into your people who are values-driven and values-based, and grow your footprint on the ground, because, again, that will become your tira, your crew that will carry you through the good and the bad, and will do that for your community as well. Third, get yourself a mentor. Mine was Sir Michael Cullen, who walked and talked with me a lot through those first few years about what Parliament was and also what it wasn't. It's not we are all just like, little blips and, a long spectrum. So don't carry the weight of the world on your shoulders, but go hard while you've got the ball. But, for Michael, and something that I hope that I've taken on board, which is probably why I do so much work across aisle, is that, he said as a junior minister, as a junior opposition senior opposition member, after being a junior minister, watching all of the repeals from National in the early 90s of their critical legislation that they're really proud of doing. So one of the things that he did as a senior minister in the fifth Labor government was to try and really create enduring legislation. And that's, I think, something that I hold as a bit of a challenge for us all. It's about building common ground. I've got no interest in attacking, build common ground, because what you're trying to do is create policy that is lasting, it's enduring, and that people believe in. And your job is to work and build relationships. So I'd probably tell people a little bit about that. Finally, I'd say have some clear rules that you set for yourself. Michael said to me when I was a backbencher, your life will get busy as soon as you're a minister, so set your rules now, because you won't do it once you become a minister, and I've seen that's true. But always cordon off. I cordon off like half a day. My family are like listening to this going, you're a liar. But try to cordon off half a day, whereas like it's phones off, it's just dedicated to the people that you love. Sometimes it doesn't always totally work out, but there are some really good rules, and that's just about keeping your base, keeping your crew solid.
Half a day, man, that just, I don't think people realise how busy ministers are. The fact that you have to cordon off half a day. For you, that's probably a lot, but when everyone else listening to that, it's like, wow. And I know. I talk to your colleagues and they tell me the same thing. It's grim. It's a tough job.
Yeah, and
we were trying to end this on an up note.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's pretty rough on the old relationships. Had a couple. All the best to the next one.
Yeah, shout out Nadine.
You've done the sister. We're all really tight. We're all going to feed you. We're all good. We're all good.
Hey, look, thank you very much. I want to say big thanks to the Spinoff team that made this event happen. Mark, Angela, Alyssa, Bianca, Matt, and Jane Yee, our fantastic head of podcasts here. And thanks to you guys. I think I genuinely think we're lucky to have people of your calibre in our parliament. So thank you for your insights and your candour and your time. Getting into that half-day cordon maybe. We'll do it again in 2027. Eh? Yeah. Thank you very much.
This is Climate Adaptation.
We are the pōtiki of the taiao.
And the words of those keeping the home fires burning.
It's more than just going along and planting some trees. You got to be able to defend that place to the end of your life.
We have the solutions. We just need to come back to the belief in ourselves as rangatira.
Join me, Nadine Hura, and Ruia Āpirehama, the Kōpapa Korangi Series 2, Ahi Ka. Brought to you by Te Komato o Te Tonga, the Deep South Challenge, out now on the Spinoff Podcast Network or wherever you get your podcasts.
Kia ora e te iwi, Te Aihe Butler here, podcast manager at the Spinoff. If you enjoy listening to our podcasts, consider supporting our mahi by signing up to become a Spinoff member at thespinoff.co.nz/donate. The Spinoff Podcast Network.